Hey guys, welcome to a developer interview here at PSVR without Parole. With me this week, senior game designer over at Survios for The Walking Dead Onslaught, Andrew Abedian. Dude, how's it going?
Hello, nice to be on the show. I've watched it a couple of times. It's pretty awesome.
Oh, thank you so much. Dude, you've got to be so excited, right? I mean, this is the launch of Onslaught has been kind of creeping up on us and been teased and sort of pulled back, and then this and that, whatever, COVID. And next thing you know, it's coming out next week, September 29th, right?
I cannot believe like the last 2 years have been like a wild ride, and definitely the entire pandemic situation. I mean, working on a game, getting it towards the final stretch is always kind of dizzying because you get lost in the product and you're so focused on the week to week. But like within the pandemic, it's also been like exponential. So like I didn't even realize it was September really.
So, I mean, everyone over there must be super excited, right?
Oh, we're very excited. I mean, not only just because, we've been working on it for a bit and it's transformed a lot, but just because like we can feel the hype from the community, and we just want to see how everyone's going to react playing the game because we think we built something pretty unique.
All right. So that already leads us down a good path. I love it. What can we expect from this game? Give us the elevator pitch for The Walking Dead Onslaught.
So, Walking Dead Onslaught is basically what we're referring to as an action slasher that we're creating, and obviously it's based in AMC's The Walking Dead brand. We're really focused on trying to drop you into the world of The Walking Dead as if you're playing like an episode of it. And the time period is kind of between this season 8 to season 9 time shift, which people haven't watched the show. There's this awesome community, Alexandria, kind of gets wrecked. Spoilers, but it's part of the game, so it's kind of important for me to say that. And there's like a whole war that happens, and they rebuild and bring Alexandria back in season 9. Our game takes place during the rebuilding phase, and you're rebuilding Alexandria up to that point. And within that, there's almost like two sides to the game where it's like we have all the main cast characters. So we have Rick, Daryl, Michonne, and Carol, and even Eugene in there. But really, as Rick, Carol, and Michonne, you're kind of going out and doing these supply runs to grab resources from the environment and bring it back and rebuild Alexandria and like build up an arsenal. While on the other side, you're kind of playing through Daryl's story because he came back after like a week of being gone and like a bloody cop car. And Rick's like, what the hell are you doing? And then he left real fast. So I'm not going to give too much spoilers about our story. It's very season 9 vibes where it's kind of like Rick and Daryl are fighting, and they're fighting over this higher level purpose where Rick is definitely trying to push society forward and trying to rebuild like, societal systems like law and order, and like trying to make sure that there's actual process to everything. And Daryl's really focused on like, what about the human element? Like, what about when we were a group, and why can't we do stuff that's like morally or ethically right? So that's really the tension between them throughout the entire game. And you go back and forth playing as Daryl and playing as Rick and seeing the other side. So we're really excited to see how people are going to get that feel, because it's definitely like a conversation point. It's not necessarily like a binary, Rick's right, Daryl's wrong kind of situation. But we really are excited for people to get these like levels of progression where it's like you're experiencing Daryl's story, you're experiencing these supply runs that are kind of like branching off more and more into an open map. And when you come back and you build up Alexandria, you choose what buildings you're constructing. You get various benefits for constructing different buildings. And you also choose what weapons, like as you discover your arsenal, you're upgrading in what different kind of ways. So it's a lot. It's a mouthful. That wasn't much of an elevator pitch. That was more like a sprawl.
I mean, if the building is really big, right? If there's like 100 floors, that could have been an
A
elevator
long
pitch.
elevator pitch.
Nice. But there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm glad you kind of went into so much detail, because now I can dissect it and ask you lots of questions about what you just said.
Go for it.
I think it's probably easy to market a Walking Dead game towards fans of the series, right? But people who've stuck with it for all this time have an emotional attachment to the characters, and they've been like, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Season 9, Alexandria, But I honestly dropped out many seasons ago, and half of what you said, I was like, I'm totally lost already. So how difficult is it to kind of sell your game, or to bring in people who maybe are familiar with the series or just love zombies into this world, and get them acquainted with these characters that other people are already so familiar with?
So we're trying to hit that feeling of you know who Daryl is and Rick is, and if you listen to them talk to each other, it's a familiar kind of fighting. But if you're coming into the game without seeing the show, I mean, we do our due diligence to set things up, and the conflict that I kind of outlined is not necessarily one that needs knowledge of like past events. There's a lot of references to past events that like maybe someone would be like, oh, okay. Versus a fan would be like, oh, you know. But like generally speaking, I think it's pretty easy to keep up with the story because it is kind of like a, you know, ethics kind of question. But for people who also don't care about any of that, you know, maybe they're just like, I just want to kill zombies. And that's totally fair. Like we started off this game being like, let's make walker combat awesome. And we put up this entire pillar for ourselves called like brutal combat freedom. If you just want to come in and kill zombies, cool, man. Like we got these scavenger runs, and even in Daryl's missions, you're basically killing zombies all the time. And the way that we let you interact with the walkers, we've really taken cues from the show. So much as like if you watch the show, the way that the survivors will like tackle back the walkers, or like the very like physical nature, like walkers get in your face and like you choke them and you stab them in the head and you push them away. And when they hit each other, they kind of like tumble back. So there's almost like cascading effects of crowd control. All those concepts have been taken into consideration into making the feel of our combat. So like as you go through a walker horde, you get like surrounded and locked down. You got to like push your way out. You want to make a path for yourself. You want to get walkers off you, and everything responds, right? Like if I push with my hand, it shoves them. If I hit them with my gun, they like stumble back. And we've created this entire progressive dismemberment system, not only to make it feel right, because Walking Dead is very gory, but also to provide awesome feedback, right? Like if I pistol whip a walker in the head, leaves a bruise. If I keep pistol whipping them or I shoot like their skin off, it's a hole and you see like the skull underneath. So that's the level of gore that we're trying to hit. And then it gets into like with the more powerful weapons, like take off an arm, take off a forearm, take off this, take off their shoulder, and like leave a hole in their guts. Like, you know, I think there's a lot there for people who just want to just kill zombies, because it definitely hits that fantasy as well. And a lot of our weapons are also just like fantasy fulfillment. The entire game's about empowerment, to be honest with you. So it's kind of an interesting back and forth between like the realistic feel and authenticity of The Walking Dead and the apocalypse mixed with just like how cool can we make the player feel. And this is very like raw data vibes for us, which is just like you're in VR. It's inherently cool. We want you to be kind of superhuman in some ways. So we've definitely implemented upgrades that are not realistic. Like for example, if you have a baseball bat and you get like this adrenaline upgrade, if you bash a walker in the head, it can trigger like a slow motion moment. Or like the individual weapons can do like a stun slow motion on individual walkers. Or like, you know, we have like an upgrade for our revolver, which is like if you kill a walker with the last bullet in the chamber, it'll reload your gun for free. So this is kind of the weird, you know, back and forth between simulator, fun, Walking Dead stuff to just like arcadey, actiony, pulsing awesomeness.
Yeah. It's funny, as you were talking about that, there were actually things that were pinging in my brain, memories of the other Walking Dead game that came out this year. And I have a feeling that I'm going to have to ask you a lot of questions in relation to Saints and Sinners, mostly because a lot of people are still confused out there. I was actually surprised at the confusion. Some people think that Onslaught is DLC for Saints and Sinners, when actually it's a totally different studio. Survios been around forever. This is your sixth PlayStation VR game.
Yeah.
Right? And it was actually announced before Saints and Sinners.
Yep.
So
it's definitely been confusing. I mean, there's also inherent confusion in that people don't really understand the intricacies between what is effectively the AMC version of The Walking Dead and the comic version of The Walking Dead. I know it's weird because they're both Walking Dead, but there really is kind of a division there, and we are solely with the show. And what the show brings is like characters like Carol and Daryl that don't really exist in the comics, and like we're really trying to hit those types of tones where like a majority of like audiences got acquainted to the show.
Well, let me ask you a couple easy questions first, like underhand, slow pitches, and to differentiate your game. Obviously, Saints and Sinners was very much a survival game, and it took the survival element very seriously. Stamina meter, weapon degradation. Are stamina meters and weapons degrading a part of Onslaught?
They are not. So we're definitely more taking the action element seriously. And we actually started off with stamina because we also created Creed, Rise to Glory, where we kind of had this entire stamina system. And obviously we wanted to start with that tech. But within the first 5 months of playing the game and really trying to hit these like hordes of like 30 walkers on you, it became apparent very quickly that the stamina was going to fight the player and it was just going to turn into like a sloppy mess, or that they were going to feel so disempowered that they couldn't really deal with the horde. So we nixed it. We didn't feel like it actually added anything. We felt like it took away. And then we've also talked about durability concepts for weapons, because we're like, well, if you get the katana, like what's going to make you drop it? And a lot of our solutions there, again, are focusing more on empowerment versus disempowerment. We don't want your katana to break in the middle of battle. We want you to feel cool. And so we let you upgrade the katana, and you get the katana at the appropriate point in the game so that its power level, relative to like a cleaver, it's a much longer weapon, much more powerful. It makes sense. But also we give the cleaver upgrades as well, so it's a little bit more utility, and it all the weapons have their own archetype in place in the game, and they all get more powerful as you get more crafting materials to upgrade them. So that's kind of like a big design philosophy difference between the two games. And like, I played Saints and Sinners, I loved it, very polished, very awesome. It's definitely a simulatory RPG feel, versus we are very like an action intensity feel.
Nice. And just to further differentiate the two games, can you go into a little bit more detail about the two core things that you're doing in this? You said that you're going out and scavenging, and then you're kind of doing base building at Alexandria.
Sure. The base building is almost like the central point of progression in the game. Like, you go back to Alexandria as a hub, and from there you launch off either into campaign missions, which is like you sit down at a campfire with Daryl and he starts telling you a story, and you kind of slip into his story and you start playing as Daryl. And those chapters unlock as the community grows. As you get more population, you gain more survivors.
Oh, cool.
Versus like Scavenger, which is the other side of the game, is like, you're in Alexandria, you're taking a look at a big map, and you only have access to like a couple sites, and you see these other regions that are foggy, right? And like, as your community grows, these regions will unlock, the fog will disappear, you'll have access to more sites. And when you go to those sites, like, not only are they different, they are longer, there's better materials in them, there's more walkers in them, gets more hostile. And also you can basically influence what the drop rate of materials and how many walkers there are based on difficulty as well. So if you decide to do even an early site on veteran, you're going to gain a lot more materials, but it's going to be significantly harder. Maybe your arsenal back in Alexandria isn't actually good enough, so you might not want to do that yet. But it's a lot of choice, and it's a lot of alternating back and forth, because standard experience would be like, hey, I go play a chapter from Daryl's campaign, and then from there I discover this weapon, which ends up back in Alexandria. And then I use that weapon in my loadout that I take into a scavenger mission. And when I go into the scavenger mission, I get a bunch of supplies and like come back to Alexandria. I construct a building, I upgrade that weapon. Maybe the next chapter is unlocked. Maybe the next region of the map is unlocked. And it's just like that. It kind of goes back and forth between two major components. And Alexandria is like that central hub of progression. So that we wanted to give this feeling of alternating pacing and style, and ultimately like layers of progression, so that we could build up to a more fulfilling experience over time, instead of just maybe doing like a grind through Scavenger, or just like, blasting through all the chapters separately and you're kind of done, who knows, in like 3 hours or something. The what we have now with all these layers, with all these systems and all these pieces, like QA has reported that it takes about 10 to 15 hours to get through the game. Nice. And that's like, again, alternating between effectively two completely different styles of game, back and forth, and like coming back to a hub and getting more story and rebuilding. And obviously that also depends on how good you are, because if you're going to go off into a scavenger mission and you die, I mean, you'll lose like half your haul. So there's a huge risk and reward feeling to Scavenger.
We've actually got a lot of questions from the community, and I feel like maybe they asked some of my questions better than I did. So maybe we should just jump right into them and see what they've got for us.
Go for it.
Let's see. Over on our Discord, one of our friends, Jay Meow, he says, "Did the success of Saints and Sinners play a role in the removal of multiplayer and the focus on a single player narrative?" And we didn't even talk about that. Once upon a time, Onslaught had multiplayer.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the short answer is no, it didn't really affect us. I will give you the reason though, because everybody wants to know. Obviously, when we first started this project, it was a co-op focused project. It was also focused for arcades. Things changed over time, and as the game grew, and we kind of wanted to hit these core targets. Like we wanted to make sure it felt like The Walking Dead and it made use of the brand correctly. We wanted to make sure brutal combat freedom was uncompromised throughout the entire project. That like the physicsy based nature wasn't being tampered with effectively, and also we wanted to create value for the player. Like there were a couple of key targets, and there was a period of about like 2 months of heavy discussion over multiplayer versus those targets. And in the end, it was math on paper. We didn't have enough time to create the product with the multiplayer at the quality bar that we wanted. And the important thing to say there is like, we couldn't have just shipped like a crappy multiplayer. I mean, we don't want to ship anything crappy anyway, but because multiplayer is something that needs to be maintained across the entire product and affects all the development, it would have actually reduced the quality of all the other components as well. So it was a really hard call, but we did it to maintain quality.
So I don't know if you kind of answered this by saying this, but one of our moderators, Belramio, asks, "Could multiplayer be included in a future patch?"
That is something we'd have to investigate based off of the success of the game. There's definitely more emphasis on it being a single player experience. There's be a lot that needs to be rethought at that point.
Gotcha. Gilman asks, "Will the physics engine within the game be competitive with the currently hailed engine featured in Saints and Sinners? I feel like this is important as combat, and the result of it needs to be as good as it can get."
So we've been working on this combat. It's not a system because the collection of systems like super system for the 2 years that we've had it. And even back when we showed the game off, I think there was like a long playthrough we did like a year or two ago. I'm forgetting time. But even at that point, there was a lot of major components of what the game has now. And over time, we've kind of refined it and added pieces. But also, we've retuned it for a different market because before it was kind of tuned for more arcadey market. At this point, we're pretty damn happy with it. And we're happy with it because not only can you stab things and you can chop things with an axe and you can sever things and you can carve into the skin of the walkers and disembowel and all these awesome words of gore, you also like push them and you also bash them and you get them off you. And like, to me, there's a lot of disappointment when I am in VR and I throw my hand out and something doesn't react to it. Mm-hmm. I really want to push this thing. And it's something like, even when I first started off working on raw data, like we allowed you to like pistol whip our robots, which like not a lot of people did, but like there was just such an obvious factor to it that it was just like, yeah, I mean, pistol whip them and then they go backward because I hit them in the face. So like we've developed the entire combat system to respect your hands. So regardless of what's in your hands or how you're using your hands, you push them away or you grab them, like, and again, all the other horrific things. Like, I feel like that is not just a goal for the game. It was something that we wanted to develop for the studio because we're going to use it in projects going forward. It was the same kind of thing where in like Sprint Vector, we developed an entire locomotion system to kind of solve a problem, not only for the community, but for ourselves so that we can invest in this tech going forward.
Man, Sprint Vector was so much fun. I just have to say that. Total side note. But man, nothing more satisfying. It's not a kart racer, but for some reason I still think it's the best kart racer we have. It's amazing. So I'd really like to talk about COVID a little bit, and I guess we'll kick that off with Rypop, our moderator, asking, what kinds of hurdles did the team have to overcome during the pandemic? Was it hard to make the game with the team spread apart?
There were definitely new challenges introduced by the pandemic. I mean, I don't think it's a secret that like most of the workforce is distributed at this point, not just for us, but in general, right? Like we can't really go back to the office until it's truly safe and we care about our employees not getting sick. Leading up to that whole thing, the project from a production perspective was incredibly organized. So we knew how we were going to execute. The real problems just came from like becoming distributed puts entirely new emphasis on communication and making sure that people are in line with vision and also respecting people. Like there's an awful lot to get adjusted to working from home because the line between work and life gets completely blurred out. And, you know, people have been having world's not been so great last couple of months. So we got to respect our employees' time and their energy. And there's a lot more to take into account there. I think in the end, we actually did just fine. Like it wasn't a really big impact to the development. There was just a lot that we had to get adjusted to and a lot that we already kind of saw coming because we were talking about COVID probably a full month before the lockdowns actually happened. We were taking it very seriously because, you know, our leadership was looking at other regions on the planet and was just like, this is not a joke. So yeah, I think ultimately I'm very happy with what the team has achieved, given how crazy all this has been.
Yeah. How big is Survios as a company right now?
Somewhere above 100 employees, I believe.
The Onslaught team specifically?
At its peak, the Onslaught team was probably about 50 people. Wow. So the way Survios works is it's not just one team, it's multiple teams. And we have different, game directors, such as myself, leading the different projects. And there's like an upper level of communication, then there's the individual teams. And people will be lifted from one team to another as they finish or as we need them. So it's very like a shifting organic kind of feel. But generally speaking, like we had peak about like 50 devs. And at this point, we're down to kind of a skeleton crew because we're shipping.
Excellent. That's a lot of people to coordinate, no matter how you look at it, though.
Yeah.
Excellent. Man, I don't know, man. I feel like you've told us quite a bit. You've revealed quite a bit. Is there anything else for the three people that are still watching this, going, I still don't know if this game is for me? What do you have to say to those three people to really sell them on this thing?
I would say we have a little bit for everybody. I mean, I alluded this to the beginning where it's like, if you're a Walking Dead fan, you're going to get a certain level of appreciation out of this game. But like, even if you're not, if you're just in it for the gameplay, like we really do look at gameplay first. We do have you talking with the characters. You're actually talking to like Norman Reedus, and it actually is voiced by Norman Reedus. So we have the star power there. We put a lot of love into Alexandria. We put a lot of thought into scavenging into our game modes. So I just think that if you're unsure if you'll like it, I mean, there's so many different components to it within the context of being a zombie genre game. I would say give it a shot because I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. And we put a ton of work to make sure this thing was polished and of the quality that Survios is known for.
Like we said earlier, Survios has already put out 5 games on PlayStation VR. PSVR has only been around for about 4 years. Next month it'll be 4 years. So that is insane. I don't think we've ever seen output like that from any other studio. I think most studios put out 1, maybe 2 games at this point in the last 4 years. Can you tell us how that's even a possibility?
There's a lot of hustle.
These aren't tiny indie games, man. Like you're pumping out quality titles like one after another. It's fantastic. How does that happen?
It's a lot of upper level coordination. It's the fact that we have incredibly talented devs at Survios, and that the teams jive. Up until we all had to get, pulled out of the office, like we'd hang out together. We form bonds. Like it's like a family feel. And because of that, it's very easy to get like passionate and to dive into concepts. And because we're free to kind of explore different avenues, like all of our games have been incredibly different from each other. I think the closest thing to Walking Dead is Raw Data. And that's like the first thing that we ever made. And it's so much different than Raw Data. But like if you look at our other games, Creed Rise to Glory, Electronauts, Battle Awake, Westworld Awakening, Sprint Vector, I mean, these really feel like games that are made by completely different teams. And to some aspect, they are, because Survios is made of different teams. It's just that we share our knowledge between each other, and because of that, we're always capable of being like, this game needs this right now, and like we paradrop in and we work on that thing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, if you've ever seen the channel before, you know that our viewers call themselves the Game Cats, and we make every developer meow at the end of the interview. Can we get a meow for all the cats out there? Oh no, your mic totally cut out when it happened.
Really? Oh no!
Come on, one more, make it big. Come on.
Meow.
You're officially the only developer to ever have to meow twice. Thank you so much.
All right,
Andrew, this was a real pleasure. We were so excited for your game, man, and I'm looking forward to catching back up with you guys and giving maybe a post-mortem and seeing how it all went down after the fact. Thank you for being here today, man. Really appreciate it.
Cool, man. Thank you. It was fun.